I am here with Alex Morehouse, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Banner Health. Banner Health is a hospital system, and I'm going to ask you in a minute to tell us a little bit more about that. But welcome, Alex. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, Alex, I believe you've been with Banner Health for almost 6 years now. And before that, you were at Kaiser Permanente. And then you have a pretty, I think, amazing marketing career, spending time at AAA and Charles Schwab and Ancestry.com and American Express, some real powerhouse brands. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your career path, and then also just tell us a little bit more about Banner Health. I know it's a large hospital system with, I think, $9 billion in total
12.
revenue.
12 billion, yes.
12 billion.
60,000 employees, 12
Wow.
billion in revenue, yes.
Wow. So tell us about the career path and then a little bit about Banner.
Sure. I got started in marketing. So I got out of school and went to work in marketing for American Express. And American Express at that point was a large holding company. It still is, but it had Shearson, it had IDS, it had travel, it had a multiplicity of businesses, and it used a whole lot of data in order to do the marketing. So I started out in marketing when it was a words and pictures business and worked on the branding part of it. And then it pretty quickly moved into the data business because we would look at credit card transactions and we would say, oh, Alex is buying baby stuff so she can get baby offers. And then we also started scraping all the risk data. So what was my risk scoring? And we started scraping, well, where did I call? Where did I log in? And Amex got so good at the data plumbing that they spun off a subsidiary called Epsilon. And Epsilon basically went and did the same thing. We got so good at doing it at Amex that I was part of Epsilon, and we went into Wells Fargo and we put their back-end plumbing into place. And we went into B of A, we put their back-end plumbing into place. We went into Nordstrom, so all of those buyer and loyalty programs from Nordstrom's, because marketing changed pretty rapidly over a course of time, where it went from just stimulating demand, which is typically what you do with brand advertising, to actually fulfilling on the demand. So from the time you fulfill the demand to what somebody experiences when they show up at the website, what they experience in the retail location, what they experience if they call in, all those things have to match, which means that all of the data has to be flowing completely around the company. So I started out, I thought I was going into marketing being a sort of on the creative and branding side, and I ended up on the digital side. And my title, most of my counterparts now have the title of Chief Digital Officer because I'm doing all the digital plumbing. And what ended up happening was that financial services, I spent most of my time, the first part of my career in financial services, which uses federally protected data, so a lot of privacy regs are in place. But then when financial services melted down, it was also, not coincidentally, when the Affordable Care Act went through and all of healthcare had to really pivot. Healthcare is about 20 years behind every other industry, airlines, retail, banking. And so I was recruited into Kaiser because they had to put all the plumbing in place to be ready for when the Affordable Care Act went live. And it was October 1st, and we had to be ported into not every state exchange, but the federal exchanges as well, too. So we had to have interoperability with all of those. So I had to consolidate all of our back end. And then Banner recruited me. I had never heard of Banner. Most of healthcare in this country is very regional. So there's usually a dominant player that's 3 or 4 states. We are in 6 states, but it's if you haven't been in the Southwest, you wouldn't have heard of Banner. But it's big. It's 12 billion. It's 60,000 employees. We have 500 retail locations and 40 hospitals, and it's a big player. But it also had most healthcare systems grow through acquisition. They acquire urgent care. They acquire a prescription business. They acquire PT and rehab, and none of those things talk together on the back end. So again, I was hired, it's not very glamorous, but I'm the master plumber. So I had to make all those systems talk to each other. And so I spent the past 5 years putting together this our digital transformation was putting together a digital platform so that all of us who experience frustration with why do I, clipboard of doom, why am I filling out my history yet again? It's the same system. Why is, my Banner pediatrician asking, the exact same questions of my kid over here as they are in urgent care? I already told you that. So So trying to make the back end systems talk to each other has been what I've been doing. So I kind of am straddling the left brain, which is where I have to get all the data, and then I have to translate that into a seamless customer experience, because your experience becomes the brand. So if you have a seamless, happy experience, it's a happy brand. If you have a grumpy, fragmented experience, it's a grumpy brand.
Absolutely. I think there was a point, I don't know, it might have been a couple of years ago, where marketing actually, or chief marketing officers, were spending more on technology than the chief technology officer or chief information officer of a lot of companies.
Gartner told us that. Yeah, we
Yeah,
are spending more, and I routinely spend more than our CIO.
It's amazing. Well, it sounds like you definitely have gotten a nice balance of that left brain, right brain piece. To your point, you got into marketing thinking you're going to be very creative, and you very quickly pivoted to being a technologist in some ways, and
Yes,
focused on
which
data.
is still very creative, but it's different than what everybody thinks about.
Right. Well, so I'm curious if there's a piece of advice that you wish that you'd gotten earlier in your career, or maybe even a piece of advice you would give to somebody younger, that's sort of starting out in their career.
Oh, I think a piece of advice is simply, first of all, ask for mentorship, because I'm only where I am because I had very generous people who basically helped me out when I said, hey, can you help me out? I don't know what I'm doing here. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, and also get in past your comfort zone. Because when I took that, I still remember my first day at Epsilon, which was a subsidiary of American Express. And I've been working on membership has its privileges and these gorgeous McCann Erickson photo shoots. My first day on the job, they handed me a 4-ring binder like this. It was a data dictionary. And I thought, oh my God, I've landed in hell. I have no idea what I'm doing here. But don't be afraid to try something that's way outside your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And also, is if you learn where the data is inside your company, you know everything. You have the keys to the kingdom, because every corporation has all sorts of legacy, has all sorts of back end systems. Find out where the customer data is, find out how to land it and make something out of it and translate it into data-driven marketing. Marketers always have a tough time getting money. If you have quantitative facts that sort of say, look, these people before only had so much revenue, and now they have this much revenue plus 10%, you're always going to get your campaigns funded. So follow the data and follow the money would probably be my 2 most important pieces of advice.
Nice. You mentioned mentorship at the beginning, and I think it's sometimes intimidating for young people to ask that question. Maybe it's more intimidating for even the mentor to say yes to being a long-term mentor. So is there any tip that you would give in terms of seeking that kind of advice? How did you seek your mentors over the years?
I almost sought mine accidentally, because I knew, I was in over my head, and I said, I don't want to take a lot of your time, but can you just help me out when I have questions? So I know, because I'm on the receiving end, when somebody wants a standing, my scarcest commodity is time. When somebody says, I want to meet with you every week, no matter how much I want to, I get sort of a panicky sense. Right. But if they say, look, can I touch base with you periodically? And can we talk about those things? It's enormously energizing for me, or for anybody, because to talk to somebody who's coming up is just fun, and it's energizing. And so when you make your ask, first of all, just it's the presumptive close, because the 2 people that I'm mentoring now inside Banner just showed up and said, hey, I really need somebody like you to talk about. So I'm going to get some time on your calendar. And I said, well, okay. Well, it was presumptive close. And they've been enormously, they were confident enough to do that. They weren't rude or presumptuous at all, but it was like, hey, I need this thing. I'm only going to take 30 minutes, every 6 weeks or so. And those have been great. So, and also just drive-bys are enormously powerful, because usually I'm doing something very tedious. Somebody will drop by my office and just say hi and ask a few questions. And of course, I want to stop what I'm doing and talk to them. And I always do. So don't be afraid to just poke your heads in people's offices. And the more specific you can be is to say, hey, I want to learn about this. Do you know anything about it? Then, whoever you're asking can be more helpful.
I love that. Yeah, I think asking for a long-term commitment can be burdensome for the mentor, but just that point of starting small with your ask and very specific with your ask, and then over time it may develop into a more regular thing on a continuous basis. Love it. So I believe that everybody has a superpower of some kind. And I'm just curious what you feel your superpower is.
Oh, I would have to say it's my sense of humor, not haha comedian sense of humor, but during the pandemic, I mean, it was catastrophically awful stuff that was happening every day, many times a day. And you had to laugh to keep from crying. The poor
Mhm.
couple who ended up in our hospital because they ate fish tank cleaner because somehow they thought that was going to cure COVID. I mean, it's awful. It's awful stuff. But
Right.
if you do it respectfully, but I think if you're agile and you can just laugh at we're all so frail as human beings. If you can be hard on the problem, but just not take the personal stuff seriously, it gets so much easier. No one's, most of the time, no one's going to die. It's like, all right, you're over on budget, or this file didn't go through, or it's not that awful. Could just having a little bit of levity helps a lot.
I definitely agree with that. And also just thinking, they call it work for a reason, so it's not fun, but it's not meant to be necessarily fun, but we could certainly enjoy our time while we work.
Yes, and if I guess the other thing that fires me is that over time your work, what your job description is different, the industry can be different, the job description is different. The thing that never changes is a sense of community that you can either choose to bring to the party or not, and you can choose to build an environment. You have your neighborhood with your family, you have your neighborhood that you live in, your family community, you have your church community. Work is a community, so you can either build it into something that is fun and respectful, and people have a place at the table and feel valued, or if you don't pay attention to it, it doesn't end up like that. So put some effort into thinking about what sort of community do you want. That's not just me or any individual. What sort of community do you want to build?
Yeah, I love that. I think that people that build community everywhere they go are very powerful. If you can um, host your own party, if you
Yes.
can.
Can I change my superpower?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to change my superpower. It's so obvious. I didn't state it. Only hire people who are way smarter than you are, and then get out of their way. Support them and get out of their way. I mean, to this day, my team, it's like every single one of them is so far ahead of me, but just get out of their way. Hire really good people, keep them happy, and get out of their way.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, we always talk about what roadblocks can I remove for you? It's
Yes.
like, if I can remove roadblocks for my team, then I'm doing okay, I think.
Yes.
Okay, so we're at the time of this recording, we're emerging out of the pandemic. I mean, people are getting vaccinated around the country, and we're starting to open up and feel better about interacting with other humans again, not just through a
Mm-hmm.
screen. And so I'm curious, other than the pandemic, what other challenges, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing as a marketer?
The biggest challenges I'm facing as a marketer is that all brand loyalty has really been severed. And on top of that, how we consume healthcare it's been completely severed, because it went from, oh, I go into a clinic to get better, to, oh, I go into a clinic and there are people with cooties there and I'm going to get sick. So everybody has figured out, all right, what are the virtual ways I can get care? Do I want to do a virtual visit? Do I want to use a symptom checker? Maybe I just want to go to urgent care. What are the difference? How I consume healthcare, everybody is reinventing as they go. So we poll every month how many people, what percent of the population is staying out of clinics. And it was at the peak of the pandemic was 80%. So we couldn't get people in at all. It's still about a third of the population is staying out, because they sort of know healthcare isn't healthcare, it's sick care. The sick people go into those places. So we're really trying to reinvent. And the work that I spend most of my time is, how do we deliver healthcare outside of bricks and mortar? Because we were forced to do that during the pandemic. So how do we carry that forward? It's more efficient. Our physicians like it better. Our patients like it better. How do we carry forward a virtual experience or a telephonic experience with nurse hotlines or all sorts of other ways to deliver healthcare?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that retail has become much more multi-channel, and it sounds like healthcare has as well.
Yes.
Excellent. So where do either you find inspiration, or where do you find inspiration for your team?
Oh gosh, well, those are two in the same. I find inspiration in my team just watching them, because we are so different. Everybody on my direct reports team is so different. The way their minds work is different. The way they approach problems is different. The skills and experience they bring is different. So watching them gives me energy every day. Even when the task at hand is tedious, the way they go about problem solving, it never stops astonishing me. We have some gnarly, gnarly problems. And also the way they do it with generosity for one another. It's, yeah, I'm getting choked up.
Well, I love that. And it sounds like a relatively diverse team in terms of points of view and skills and things like that.
Yes.
But are there certain values that either you as a leader want to demonstrate to the team, or that you require of somebody that you are interviewing for a potential position on your team?
Okay. So baseline is be kind. If you can't be kind, get out. I want nothing to do with you. Be kind and be generous, and be generous with your spirit, because there's too few of us and too much work to do. And unless you can be generous with one another and with your skills, it just won't work. It's not a value judgment. It's just not going to work here. And I think the other is probably high challenge and high support. So my style is, okay, so there's this big thing we're going to have to do, but you have 100% of support. If someone falls down, I will take the heat. And likewise, you need to do that for your team. So provide high challenge and high support for them. So create an environment where people can be their best, and where they can fail, and where they can fail and won't be afraid of failing.
And what I hear in that too is that there needs to be an element of trust, so that, you know, I know that the rest of my team has my back. If I am challenged with something difficult or pushing myself or pushing my team, you know, that means that there's going to be occasional failures, and that means that the rest of the team has to be able to support you when you fail.
Yes, that's true. There is a level of trust there, and I think everybody knows whether it's something positive, like I want to go on vacation for a couple of weeks and I need things not to fall apart, or I'm struggling with something here, to be able to say I'm struggling and know that you'll get the support. And they have been there, as I said, they're extremely generous with each other and with me.
That's great. So I'm going to shift gears a little. So setup exists to connect and empower marketers, but particularly that usually means we match brands and marketing agencies together. So we sort of live in that space between marketing agencies and brands. And so I'm curious, just generally, how you work with marketing agencies. Are there certain things that you always would outsource to an agency? Are there certain things that you would never, ever outsource to an agency?
So let's see. So I'm always thinking about, what do I want to rent and what do I want to own?
Yeah.
Anything that's creative, I want to rent, just because there are fabulous people that you can own on the creative side, but creative people need to be around other creative people, and they just spark their ideas. And so I always want that the raw creative horsepower I want to rent. Anything that has to do with the sort of intellectual capital that I want to keep inside, research, analytics, data, CRM, those things I want to own, because first of all, it's really expensive to rent, to get an agency to do it. And I tend to stack my agencies that way. So I tend to have a powerhouse creative agency as my agency of record. And that's where the creative sensibility comes that infuses everything. But I find the best value with having an anchor, a large, typically New York City agency. I shouldn't say New York City, but a global agency. Let's say a global agency, and you pay global price tag for those, with some really, really talented boutique agencies, because agencies really only come in two flavors. You're either a global agency and you own 300 entities all over the world, or you're a boutique that has the original founder and creative team in place, and you haven't been swallowed yet by IPG or Omnicom or Dentsu or whoever it is.
Right.
And I find the two keep each other honest, because I get my best value from the boutique agencies, which are usually 3 or 4 people that started out on their own, and they're thinking, because they're entrepreneurs, they are fast, they are agile, they are good. And I'm just thinking of a couple in particular that I've worked with that they almost cross over into business consultancies, Propane out here in San Francisco. I mean, there's some really, really good ones that are just fabulous in their niche.
And you sort of mentioned boutique versus what I'll call holding company or global agencies, but we also think of agencies in terms of specialist versus generalist. I mean, there are certainly specialists that are email marketing experts or CRM experts
Yeah.
or content creators or whatever. So I'm wondering kind of what balance you think is important for Banner Health or just generally your the brands you've worked on, the balance between a generalist agency that's maybe not the best at one specific thing, but has
Right.
expertise at multiple things versus a specialist.
Well, it's an important question because most agencies say we do it all. Very
Right.
few agencies will say, I just do email or I just do, websites or whatever it is. So I do pretty deep forensics to say, all right, so this agency started with, a small group with founders that started on one competency and then they built out all these others. So I tend to choose the agency based on what's your core competency, not what are things that you layer on. And particularly so many agencies now, and it's much exaggerated post-pandemic because a lot of agencies now, they don't tell you that they're white labeling, but they have a core staff and then they have a whole bunch of portfolio partners that they bring in. It looks like this little agency has all, this SEO genius over here, but it's actually a freelance person or a partnership they're working with. So I have to get really clear on, okay, so what am I getting here? All right, am I getting creative here? Where am I getting media buying? Sort of breaking it down into those buckets. Who's doing the SEO is really important. Who's doing the digital marketing? So I tend to take a look at my media mix and then making sure I have somebody in the agency family that is fleshing out that part of the media portfolio.
That makes sense. Well, we have a service called the Agency Assessment Service, and the purpose of that is to really get underneath the hood to understand what makes the agency special and unique, and what is their absolute best capability versus, because to your point, they often say they're good at everything and it's hard to know what they're truly good at. Right.
I'm the Swiss Army knife. Yes.
Right. Totally fair. Well, okay. So as marketers, we often have to work with non-marketing functions within our companies. I'm curious how you demonstrate the value of marketing to those that aren't necessarily marketers by trade.
Right. I was very, very lucky because I came up through the ranks in financial services. And if you're working at American Express, the way it worked there is, as a baby marketer, they gave you, $4. And at the end of the year, if you said, oh, I'm giving you back $5, I earned $5, you had to measure it all. Then next year you got $10. And then they'd say, how much did I get for it? So you had to demonstrate the ROI. And because they're finance geeks, they listen to that. So money talks, right? And you had to be able to say, oh, you gave me $4 and I only gave you $3 back. And then they'd say, sorry, no more budget for you. But you had to, we actually had to do true ups every quarter. So every 12 weeks, we had to say how much money have you earned for the company. Wow. And actually, as part of the onboarding, we had to take a week-long class in financial literacy. So they would say, you can't say you're an arts and crafts marketing person over here. You need to be a finance person. So I hated it, and it stood me in very good stead. So what usually my two best friends are the CFO and the CIO. So the CFO, because every year all of us as marketers saying, please give me something. You have all sorts of other priorities. And I would say, okay, so what would need to be true? I usually sit down with them. And again, I actually worked with Chuck doing this at Schwab, saying, okay, so I'm going to build you a model here. And with your finance people, with your CFO, I'll do it based on your assumptions, but I want it to be a complete spreadsheet so that if I ask for this money, you and I agree that what's going to come out the other end is, this amount, and hold me to it. So I don't get my bonus unless I earn the money that I say I'm going to. I don't get my bonus. So every year I bet my bonus that if I don't do what I say I'm going to do, I don't get my bonus. I've never missed my bonus because I'm pretty conservative about what I'm projecting. Right. But make sure that your finance partners are the ones that are part of building that spreadsheet. Otherwise, they'll just say, oh, a bunch of marketing people who, by the way, couldn't make it in finance if they tried. They're the ones who came up with the spreadsheet. It's suspect, so we're not going to do it. And then the other partner is the CIO, because I use so much technology. But equally important has been the CHRO, or head of HR. And so I have always sat, or not always, but the last 20 years, I always go to the board meetings for the companies I work for, but I always sit on the comp committee because they all say we want to become more customer centric. And I say, well, okay, unless, my principle is follow the money, unless you make it hurt for the whole company to not be customer centric, nothing's going to change. So unless you have senior leaders up to your CEO having their bonuses in their pocketbook based on how much money you make or don't make on your customer sat metrics and your customer ease of use metrics and your acquisition retention metrics, nothing changes. So CHRO, chief, usually chief financial officer, CIO. And then the other thing that I do as well is I typically ask that whoever the head of sales is or the CRO, chief revenue officer, say, hey, let's have shared goals, because, you know, if you don't win, I don't win. If I don't win, you don't win. And that way it makes it really clear, because it's very easy for sales and marketing to butt heads. Yeah. So I just say, okay, we're going to share our goals. And that means we have to pay attention to each other, include one another in decision making. And that's always worked pretty well for me.
I love that. So common definition of what a quality lead looks like, for example, between the head of revenue and the head of marketing.
Yes, exactly.
Great. So is there a past campaign or program, it could either be at Banner or in your previous life, that taught you something hugely valuable because either it was a raging success, or maybe it was a huge flop and it taught you something that you needed to learn?
Well, probably the one at Banner. So when we launched on our digital front door, I thought, oh, this is familiar, right? Because there's a recipe for how you did it. And I had done it at so many companies before. I thought, okay, so I'm just going to take what I learned in banking and drag it over here. And certainly the technology piece is pretty, what you have to do to land the data and scrub it and structure it is not that different. But the part that I completely underestimated is the change management. If you're moving the cheese of physicians who are fabulously overworked and have so much change coming at them and so much paperwork that they have to put through, and if you're also moving the cheese for patients who are they're used to picking up the phone to schedule an appointment, instead you're giving them this open table, like, you know, you're going to do it over here. So I stubbed my toe early on and then quickly course corrected, and then, you know, had an expert panel of physicians who helped guide all that. But it's very easy when you're doing these large scale digital transformations to think, oh, it's just a stack of technologies. Actually, tens of thousands of people's lives. It's your employees. It's all these people are coming to your website, to your call center, to your retail locations, to your clinic. So take that very seriously and pay attention. You don't have to guess. They're telling you all the time through their actions. It might not be through their words, but they're telling you through their actions if you've gotten it right or you've made it too difficult.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay, so I have some questions for fun that have nothing to do with marketing specifically.
Okay.
Oh, one of them does. The first is there a movie or a band or a book or a quote that really inspires you?
Probably the most recently, I finished a book that really inspired me, and it's called The Splendid and the Vile. And it's the story of Winston Churchill and the Battle of Britain. And I thought every book on World War II has been written, but it was really interesting because it pulls directly. I guess they asked 40,000 people, just average citizens, to keep diaries. So it's very vivid. It's very real what it was actually like. And you know, my first thought was, oh my God, we're such babies, you know, compared to what they lived through. COVID was like nothing. We had to stay at home and eat too much pizza, and they were getting bombed to smithereens every single night with no help in sight. So that was very, very inspirational to me.
Nice. Okay, and so other than family, where do you find joy outside of work?
Oh, I outside in the natural world. I think I thought I was going to do something very different with my life. And so I love gardening. I, at one point, led safaris in Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania. I spent a lot of time out in the bush. So that was the secret other life I forgot to have.
Wow. But you got to at least have a piece of it.
Yes.
It sounds like.
Yes.
Excellent. Is there a brand that you've never worked on that you really admire? And then what do you admire about that brand?
Oh gosh, wow. Probably one of LMV, Louis Vuitton, I forget all those initials. They have done such a nice job. And again, it's a stratospherically protected brand meaning they don't discount ever. They keep their secret sauce very secret, but they have managed in a world that commoditizes everything to not commoditize themselves. And they span cultures, so that whether you see their stores in Asia or you see them in Paris, they have consistency of brand, but distinctness of geography. So I think they've done a wonderful job. They're spared, because they are not multi-channel, so they have unique set of circumstances. The other one that I think has done a remarkable job is Williams-Sonoma. So they have taken an extreme, and they don't do a single, they don't spend a single dollar on advertising, but they use their stores as in-person sort of experiential. And then they actually only hope to break even in their stores. Everything is sold online or over the phone, but it's just a different business model. And they have kept their brand really strong, and they are some of the best marketers I've ever. They're very quantitative because everything is measured, but they're really, really good marketers.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you picked a retail brand, because, retail initially got hammered by COVID, but I think the retailers that really understood multi-channel early, even before COVID hit, were the ones that were the most successful, throughout COVID, and didn't actually take nearly the hit that those that were kind of scrambling, for example, to figure out e-commerce.
Right, correct.
Yeah. Okay, I have a silly question for you. Is there a fictional story or a fictional realm that you would like to live in that maybe intrigues you?
Oh, it won't surprise you. It's not fictional, but out of Africa. If I could take myself back in time to, Africa in the teens or 20s, I would be there in a heartbeat.
Wow. And teens and 20s, had their ups and downs in that part of the world.
Yeah, you're likely to be eaten or die of malaria. Highly likely, yes.
Totally fair. All right. So last question is just, is there something that you wish that I had asked as part of this conversation that I didn't ask you?
No, you're a very skillful interviewer, so I appreciate it, and you made it easy. So no, thank you, Joe. There
All
was
right.
nothing
Well,
you didn't ask.
okay, great. Well, thank you, Alex. So this is Alex Morehouse, is the Chief Marketing Officer for Banner Health. I really appreciate this time. This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you.
It was a pleasure, Joe. And for any of you who are out there, it's alexandra.morehouse@bannerhealth.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn too. So I always respond. So if you have something to say or a question, don't suffer in silence, ask.